Hello, everyone, and welcome to Amplifying Voices on Turtle Island, an intersectional caucus. Thank you so much for joining Art and Activism, Artivism of Social Change. My name is Isaac, and I'm one of the co-founders and board members of Black Lives Matter Sudbury. Before we get started with this panel, we would like to acknowledge that Black Lives Matter Sudbury is located in Nisquacomock, later known as Sudbury. This land on which we learn, work, and live is located on the traditional lands of the Atikamekw and the Wanapitei First Nation in the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory. We would also like to recognize the presence and importance of important contributions of Métis peoples in this land and in this community. Here at Black Lives Matter Sudbury, we recognize that reconciliation does not begin and end with a simple land acknowledgement. We must work to actively decolonize spaces and uplift Indigenous ways of learning and knowing. In addition, we must all aid in the ongoing battle for Indigenous sovereignty, access to clean drinking water, and seek justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and two-spirited individuals. Furthermore, we want to acknowledge that February marks Black History Month. While oppression, discrimination, and systemic injustices cannot be diminished to just 1 month a year, it is important to recognize this time as an opportunity to educate yourself, your family, and your friends on the historic contributions of Black communities on Turtle Island. We would also like to take a moment to thank our conference sponsors. It is because of their generosity that we've been able to thrive and present important programming like this caucus within our northern community. Biographies of our panel participants and a full list of supporters can be found on our website and in the chat. We are pleased to offer ASL interpretation for each panel provided by Interpretation Signe et Parole. Following this panel, all attendees will receive a feedback survey that could be filled out for a chance to win a prize pack of items, which include the caucus logo, designed by Raven Dabowski. This logo expresses the power and connection among marginalized individuals across Turtle Island. The art depicts the interconnection between humanity and nature. The woodland stylization and vivid colors aim to celebrate the solidarity among Indigenous and Black communities. Our moderator for this panel is Roanna Brown, co-founder and chair of Black Lives Matter Sudbury. Our panel consists of Kalkadan Asifa, Kira Kute, Nimkins Connor Lefelton, and Emilio Portal. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for your participation. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to our moderator, Roanna Brown.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Like Isaac said, my name is Roanna, and I am so excited to be sharing in this space with you. Welcome, panelists, welcome, viewers, and let's get cracking. Let's talk about Artivism. So our first question for today is, how did you get started with Artivism? And can folks tell us a little bit about themselves, whether that's where their practice started, where they're situated, how they found Artivism? We'd love to hear about it. And so I will pass it to Connor.
Congrats. I'm just going to start by introducing myself. Ani Bojo, Nimkin Sandishna Kazo, Kikendan Don Jabab, Neshin Don Demanishnadan in Dao. My name is Connor Lefelton. I'm from Dokis First Nation. For me, art and activism has always played a big role, whether that be for learning culture or for showcasing culture. I do a lot of beadwork here, reclaiming my traditional name, reclaiming my territory, and it's a way to reclaim culture and also just mental health in a non-Western way. I also use it in poetry, and writing is often the medium that I use the most, whether that be through slams or even just different contests. But really, my art is about showcasing what we've lost from these territories and the knowledges that we can regain from them. And so different things regarding reconciliation, the real history of Turtle Island, or just my situations in life, the things that I've experienced. I think art and activism play such a key role because they get to touch a lot more individuals more directly, and you can see it. You ask questions about it. If I'm wearing my medallion or my beaded earring, someone can ask about it. They can ask why I have a wolf tooth in my ear, and really begin that conversation to learn. And I think it really just opens the door to so much beautiful learning.
Thank you, Connor. I think that's such a great spot to kick off, talking about the accessibility of art and activism and how it's really easily presented to the community and members. So thank you for that. Kira, please tell us about how you got started with Artivism and a little bit about yourself as well.
Hello, so I'm Kira. Well, it's a long story, honestly. I mean, since I was a little girl, I've always loved art. And, my mother, she always told me growing up, you have to work 10 times harder than everyone out here. You cannot be mediocre. You have to be the best of the best. And, I ran with that. But because of my background with race, with sexual assault, with generational trauma and addiction, I never really had any outlet to put my emotions out there. So I turned to art, and I truly invested so much of myself and my story into it. And before I knew it, there was people that could relate to my story, and I actually felt seen for once. So, art has a very, very special place in my heart. And it honestly came from coping. It was a coping mechanism, and now it's something really beautiful that I get to share with everyone.
That's so beautiful. And I want to thank you for being so vulnerable and open with us. And I'm like, trust me when I say I see you, I hear you, and you're looking fabulous, and so happy that you are here today.
Thank you.
All right, and I'd like to pass it to Amelia. Tell us how you got started with Artivism and a bit about yourself as well.
Hello, my name is Emilio Portal. I live in Aswakamak, Robinson Huron Treaty Territory. Wow. I just feel so touched by what Connor and Kira just said. It was just like really moving for me, and because I mean, in some way my trajectory has always been about kind of looking at things that are discarded or forgotten or thrown away, the detritus of our commodity culture, that kind of thing, and trying to reclaim that, but more than reclaim, to honor those objects and to honor in musical sonic terms these kind of forgotten sounds or even arrangements or different methodologies of working and of thinking, So for me, it's a lot about the philosophies behind the art and how to shift that and how to move away from a more, indoctrinated Western colonial kind of mindset and move into a place where things are much more fluid or more poetic and more even ancestral. We're trying to connect with that kind of ancient history about ourselves, even though that might be totally hidden. Even our own histories can be, erased and are discarded a lot of the time. So to try to tap into that and to look deeply into our pasts, I think that's a kind of hub of what I do, of my practice.
That is such a beautiful sentiment. I appreciate you sharing. And I really feel that, as artists now, contemporary artists, we really have to move away from the traditional modes of art and, really go with what feels right, not necessarily what the institution tells us is right, And last but surely not least, Calculator, please tell us, how did you get started with Artivism and a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Rihanna. Thank you guys for having me. I'm sorry that I can't be on camera at the moment. I've been painting for a lot of years. If I find myself reluctant to call myself an artivist, I feel like it implies a certain level of frontline dedication. But I feel like what I do kind of is just a piece of the larger movement that's going on with social change. I was always kind of like an artist, a muralist. I transitioned from canvas to indoor to outdoor projects, and I practiced some street art in my younger days. Not quite like a graffiti writer, but I catch some tags here and there. But I was into spray painting characters, we paste. But in 2015, I guess with the death of Sandra Bland in police custody, that really, and kind of in the early days of BLM, that myself and another artist, Alan Andre, we painted a Sandra Bland piece, and that was kind of the catalyst for doing more, community-based pieces surrounding social justice, especially in the Black community as it relates to police violence.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that as well, Calcadan. And your art truly does resonate with the community, Black people in general, being able to experience your work. And I just might say, I think you touched on something really important. You're saying I don't necessarily call myself an artivist, but I think it's something that all of us as people of color have to navigate, this idea that being a person of color is inherently political, and that sometimes everyone attributes our work to activism just because our mere existence is political. So I think that's something really important for us to recognize and reconcile. And I really appreciate you for touching on that.
Thank you.
So with that, let's get on to our next question, which is, how is your work rooted within activist practice? Is it, or is it more just a matter of being inherently political? Like I said, because, you know, we are people of color, we are queer people, we are, you know, marginalized different bodies. And I will pass it to Emilio first this time.
I totally agree with that. I think that, you know, it's very difficult to even talk about who I am, you know, a lot of times. And, you know, it's the only way I can, the only word that I feel like is kind of, that I can relate to is the word mixed. You know, it's like, it's kind of a really crazy, you know, mixture of like the colonial, the conquistador, you know, but also the enslaved, the indigenous, you know, this all compounded into each other. And so there's a, you know, it may be a level of violence inside my own being because of that history. I feel that, you know, and so it's, but then I also feel this immense beauty and richness to this kind of, these very ancient ways of relating to the world, which have been forgotten a lot of in a lot of places, you know. And it's not because the people forgot the ways of relating, but it's because it was, you could say, beaten out of them, you know, through generations of indoctrination and violence and dispossession of land and dispossession of spirituality and language. You know, it's a devastating kind of history if you think about all of that. And I kind of relate to almost the material world, and you could say the sonic world, which I also see sound as being material because it's all about it's vibration, you know. But I'm really interested in kind of, like I said before, honoring the forgotten, you know, honoring, it could be like a palette, for example, that just nobody really even cares about. It's just completely discarded and is destined for the landfill, or, you know, the, what do you call those things that crush wood, you know, and turn it into like pulp, or then you can compost it or whatever. But it, you know, all those things, all the pallets, that's all a kind of colonial trajectory, because forestry is like resource extraction, all of it, you know, is all connected. So the material objects are very much in some way like us, you know, they have their own histories and they're connected to certain political systems. And so, you know, I think about that a lot, and trying to put importance, or what's the word? Oh, I think about all material objects as kind of having a sentience, you know. So there's a world that's alive, that's beyond our kind of only our human realm, you know. And so, and we depend on that realm that is not really speaking to us in this kind of normal language, but we use it, you know, we extract from it in order to create houses and all the gadgets that we use all the time, you know. So that's a, you know, a kind of whirlwind of thought there that's talking about, you know, the forgotten, and how that's, I feel it's totally connected to racism, because for me, the root of racism is about not being able to relate to difference. So if somebody's different from you, you kind of you try to crush them or belittle them or erase them, or, you know, make them feel uncomfortable, so that it's like, you know, they have to assimilate into a certain status quo. And it's, you know, it's so problematic. And it's so ancient too. So, you know, I won't say too much more, because I'm sure a lot of other things can be said, but
no, that's great. I think you touched on so many important things, you know, this the cultural genocide that marginalized people of color have faced, you know, this idea that we can't practice our own forms of art and artivism, these versions being lost, which is why a lot of time people of color, you know, our art becomes artivism, because its mere existence is something they told us we couldn't have. We weren't allowed to take up this space, you know. And so I really appreciate you sharing that sentiment and giving us an awesome kickstart point for this question. And with that, I will pass it to Connor.
Gretch, Emilio, you gave me so much to think about. Everything just kept kind of showing up in my mind. I think for me, art is about unlearning, relearning, and then teaching. That process of really processing, of using the materials to physically digest the world and to make it into something beautiful, or make it into something that can be understood. When we think of the wampum belt teaching, and how it's a physical belt, and it's the history of the treaty made with beads, and how it's a document that is living and that can be interpreted, and can even be interpreted by those who cannot see because they feel it. It's textural, it's living. And so it's moving beyond those Western documents of this is what it is and this is what you're gonna learn it to be. For me, it's also about like decolonizing spaces and places and times and history. Like when I introduce myself in the language, or in meetings when I start to bead, and some people get uncomfortable and they're like, why are you playing around? And I'm like, I'm learning, and I'm teaching myself, and I'm growing, and I'm putting that in the art that I'm doing. And now my art is living, and my art has stories that when you wear it, you're gonna have those stories, and you're gonna have that living piece inside of you. So for me, it's a lot about also the history. Like dancing and singing is something that was illegal for us for forever, and it is still under some prohibitions. And even being human until the 1950s, we weren't even human. And so having that understanding and being able to be fully human and to experience everything that humanity has to offer through art and through vision, through song, poetry, and all of those beautiful things that the world lives through. I think it's detriment to our people to live and to exist in those spaces. And it's just what we have to do to survive. It's inherently political to do art because it has a message and it has something to share. And it often pushes those boundaries of what people think are okay. And it's often the only medium where people are okay to listen. You know, maybe they won't listen to something like this where we're speaking, but they'll see our painting and they might read our bio, or they'll listen to our song and they'll inherently have to understand the message, or they'll be in a poetry slam and they have no choice but to clap along because everybody else is clapping. And so it kind of forces those boundaries to kind of fall, and you have to listen because you're in it, and you're in this space to learn and to live that culture. And I think for me, yeah, it's just digesting it and learning about myself and learning what I can do, and the teachings that come with those different art forms, and whether that be patience in beading, or learning what my talents are when finding a new note on the piano, things like that. It forces your own boundaries that you exist within. So for me, it's just about growing, and that is inherently political, because to exist and to explore la francophonie, queerness, and indigeneity is inherently political, regardless of how you look at it. So I definitely think I also could say so much more, but I'm so interested in what other people have to say that I'm just going to leave it at that.
You know what? That was so beautiful. And I'm so thankful to be sharing in this space with you, Connor. I think you really touched on intersectionality of identities. And like, I'm going to plug Kimberly Crenshaw. And I'm like, we can't talk about intersectionality without talking about a Black woman who coined it. But I think it's like also important about how do we navigate that? You know, it's so difficult to figure out where our space is in these areas. And also looking at, you said something so beautiful that made me think, you know, you're talking about different art forms. And I think like, you know, originally I said like these non-traditional forms of art, but I'm like, it's not non-traditional. It's non-Eurocentric, non-white supremacist, non-Euro-patriarchal forms of art. And it's like these non-colonial forms of art is what we're producing. So I think that's something really important. Like, you know, myself as an academic in the institution, that we really push beyond what tradition is and look at like, you know, beyond colonialism, beyond the patriarchy and Eurocentrism, you know, because it's so important and vital. And with that, I would love to pass it to Kalkadan and hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys have all just given me so much to consume and think about. Yeah, you know, I think like Connor was saying, it is inherently kind of like when you're a racialized person, it's a political act in the society to just exist and express yourself existing. And I think, you know, going to the root of the question of like how my work is within an activist practice, I think, you know, creating the art that I always wanted to create for myself, being inherently political was one thing. And I think it's always been kind of subversive to be an artist anyway. But the difference for me in what street art can do, or that level of activist art can do, is it's not just meant for somebody to consume and think about. It's actually asking you to do something, right? It's asking you to take action on a subject matter, or to get involved, or to raise your awareness level so that you can, you know, make different decisions and choices in life. And I think that's like the importance of what activist art practice for me means. And I think, you know, just, yeah, like, I don't, I'm sorry, I'm kind of like at a loss for, because I'm trying to think about what everybody else said, but yeah, it's that's basically what it means to me. It's just like that ability to go beyond just being like, here's something, like, you're, oh, are you aware of this, to like, no, you need to do something to change this now. That's, you know, what it means for me.
No, totally. And something I definitely have to commend, because, you know, you're talking about street art. As a street artist, I'm like, there's something so beautiful about it because it's so out there, you know, like people have to see it. We have to walk places, we have to drive places. And I love that street art is so inherently embedded in these foundations of our community. Like, not to discredit anyone else's art form, I don't want to do that at all. But what I love about street art is a lot of it, I mean, it has this huge contentious history, right? I'm sure we all know that, you know, with like graffiti culture and all this. So I'm just like, I just want to commend you, you know, like you're a true icon and I love your art so much. So thank you really for sharing all this.
Well, thank you so much. And sorry, just to add one more thing to that, because sorry, just on the topic of street art, like as you're expressing it, is just like, you know, there's a certain level, especially with graffiti art, that is so anti-capitalist, anti-colonial, like, you know, reclaiming of space and that whole thing, that, you know, it's gonna always make it contentious. But that's what I love about it, is like, especially when somebody goes and does something for a purpose, like for no money, on somebody else's property, and just takes over that whole thing. Like there's so much power in that. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
No, thank you. And honestly, like, I just have to say it, everyone, like, I'm trying so hard not to snap with what you all are saying, because I'm like, I know it's going to make noise when you're talking, but I'm like trying really hard. But yes, all of this and so much more. And last but not least, Kira, please share your thoughts.
Man, you guys are so beautifully eloquent. Oh my goodness. But yeah, everything that was said truly resonates with me. You know, the very subjects that we are activists for are the foundations of my life experience. You know, through art, I could emotionally articulate who I was, and stories that are, you know, all too reminiscent of my own. I tend to bring forth my sentimental testimonies visually. And I think it helps a lot, because there is an obvious disconnect between understanding a problem and living through it. And, you know, to be inherently political in my existence, it does become exhausting to bear the burden of constantly articulating, educating why my existence is hard, why I move through the world at a disadvantage. And, you know, I think art, it gives me the safe space to, you know, as well educate people and give them insight into my life. I at least can have some sense of catharsis when it comes to it. You know, it's this is a little off, but it is unfortunate that for change to occur, on top of being oppressed, we have to also be the teachers. But, you know, when you're the oppressed group, you know everything about the oppressor, things that they don't even know about themselves. So, you know, to take that responsibility, the least I could do is, you know, make something beautiful out of it. And that's what I hope to do through my art, and it shows. So
yes.
Yeah.
All of that. And I think like you said something so beautiful in that sometimes, I mean, I'll speak for myself personally, but like sometimes I don't want to be a Black artist. I just want to be an artist. Exactly. And it's like everything we do is so inherently political, no matter what we do. And it's like, first, I could paint a tree and they'll be like, how does this root to Blackness? And I'm like, don't get me wrong, I love to, you know, embed that in my practice because I think it's important as part of who I am. But why can't a tree just be a tree sometimes? You know what I mean? And like I said, that's like the difficult line for us to navigate as, you know, visual activists, as Zanelli Maholi says. How, like, why does everything have to be so political? But I mean, like, we know why: white supremacy, colonialism, oppression, you know, these are the reasons why. So I'm really loving this conversation around this. And I would love to use this as a segue into our next question, you know, we're talking about the here and the now and like the history, but, you know, how do we foresee the future of art as resistance developing to become, more widely used, better understood and respected, and maybe even like less political for us, those of us who are marginalized, which is all of us here, participating? Like, how do we foresee that? And this time I'm going to pass it to Calcadan first.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, right now I'm kind of like on the fence about this question. It was a great question, by the way, and I really appreciated it. I'm kind of like somewhat skeptical and jaded a little bit, because I've seen a lot in my life. And I believe in the power of art to affect change, both through the creation and the consumption of art. And I just think that like there's been a big shift now with our digital culture and social media. And it allows the work to be disseminated much faster and in a much more, immediate way, but it also means that it doesn't get taken in the same way, right? And it almost, I'm just speaking right now strictly about my art form and street art and graffiti and murals and that stuff, but like it becomes almost like performative in a way, because it's kind of like for the clout and for the likes and for the gram, and that's something that's happening with a lot of different things. But I just think, right now we are in a point in time where it could go both ways, because it's kind of like the information battle age, right? Where art can be used to push progressive and revolutionary messages for social change, but it can just as easily be used as a tool for propaganda and social aggression and division. And like we see that all the time. I remember seeing like a few years ago, there was some dude on Instagram. He was like a decent enough like aerosol artist, but his whole thing was painting pro-Trump murals. So it's just like, it's just like, and it burned me to be like, oh, that's my art form. Like, it shouldn't be like, devalued like that. Like, anyway. So yeah, I think, like we're coming at a point of real polarization with a lot of things. And so it becomes just that much more important to be that much more intentional with the work that we do. And just to make sure, that we're not falling in the traps, some of these traps that are out there. That's just my opinion.
No, totally. I agree with that so much. And I think like you touched on social media, and I'm like, I have this constant question going. I'm like, social media, friend or foe? Because like on one hand, you have this interconnectivity that we're afforded, but on the other hand, you have this huge rise in white supremacy online. And like, I've read lots of articles about like how, platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter have created a space for white supremacy to rise. And the same thing with art as well. It's like when we see, I can only imagine how you feel seeing your art form co-opted by, this colonial culture who's just pushing back to, populate about Trump and stuff like that. So it's, yeah,
that's a lot.
But with that, I will pass it to Kira.
I'm not sure, honestly. Well, I mean, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but with this day and age, especially with my art, it can be misinterpreted. And, it's weird to see that misinterpretation, it's just so mistranslated. And I'm at a cross between, not really using my art in terms of resistance, but just putting it out there and not having any, true, I couldn't even say, like true initiative. Like it's just there. It's just existing. It's there now. I'm not sure what the future holds for it. I'm not sure what the future holds for artists who are like me, but I think it's important that we are here and that we do, share our stories through it. And that's the best that I can say.
No, I feel that on so many levels. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I can by no means see the future, but I'm like, I see you going places. I'm just going to say that. I'm like, I think, first of all, the future is Black women are the future. And I'm like, I want to manifest that. I want to manifest that, Kira. You are the future.
Thank you.
And I will pass it now to Amelia. We haven't heard from you in a second. Where do you see the future of all this going?
Gotta unmute. Oh wow. Wow. It's very complex, as Calcadan said, and Yeah, I mean, wow. You know, or, there's another invasion going on. It's just like a horrendous kind of reality. And then, we're still in a kind of in the pandemic, and it's like everything physical has been shut down, and then we have no choice but to kind of go into this online internet realm, which has its own problems, not just social, political problems, but it also has incredible environmental problems too. Like all these images that are getting uploaded onto Instagram every day. I mean, how many billions of images? Where are they being stored? In what data bank? In, how much energy does that require to store all our, nonsensical little reels and all the rest of it? It's like unbelievable, So in some way, that kind of online, incessant stream of information and of images of pixels, it's not really doesn't really produce much hope, you know what I mean? But I also I think that the future, it always will be political. I don't think anybody has a choice with that. And if we're not being political, then we're I think we would be kind of putting our heads in the sand and ignoring history, ignoring who we are and where we come from and what has happened. And we're not even close to coming to any kind of, reconciliation with any of that. We're not even close as a country, let's say, in Canada. So there's a lot of work to be done. So I think that the future is that there needs to be a lot more recognition of, that struggle and the struggle of the past. But one of the speakers in the last panel said that they believe in Black and Indigenous spaces and institutions. You need Black and Indigenous institutions all by themselves, It's like, stop being the token within that, that institution that is getting all the funding because you're there. You know what I mean? So, I totally agree with that. And I think that there needs to be new places of learning, of sharing that are dedicated to all BIPOC folk, Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a good vision to have for the future,
Yes, definitely. I'm like, oh, my hands are tingling. I want to snap some. I'm going to set one. There, one snap. That's it. Because honestly, I've been thinking a lot about that. I'm like, Sandy Hudson had said something about, wanting a seat at the table versus breaking the table versus making our own table. And I think about that a lot. And I'm like, institutions, let's talk about galleries and museums. They love to be like, we support our Black and Indigenous communities and we'll have one token exhibition, but we're still upholding colonial standards. And I'm like, I don't want to be in your racist, problematic institution. Let's build our own Black and Indigenous spaces, marginalized spaces. So I love that sentiment so much. I'm like, yes, you are so, so very right.
Oh, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
Calcadon made me think about when I was in Saskatoon. I don't know when that was, 2018 or something like that. I was there for a number of months, and I would go to the Remy Modern, which is a very, it's a very hyper modern kind of building, and it's, I don't know how much they spent on it, but there's incredible spaces in there, incredible galleries, and I would go there almost on a daily basis with my son, and I'd bring him for his nap time and read books and stuff like that. Anyways, I would sit down and I'd see people going into these exhibition spaces. And these exhibitions were expertly curated, and they were very challenging, some of them, and really compelling works. I would see people walk in and then walk back out within 30 seconds. There's no way you can even digest one work in that, and we're talking about an installation of a dozen or 15 pieces. It's ridiculous. So, and that was consistent. So I think that this kind of notion of this fast consumption and throwaway commodity culture has infiltrated us there's no time to slow down and to really take in the art, because I think art is really, it requires that kind of dedication, and it's a reciprocal thing that's happening there. So I just wanted to say that too, because I really resonate with that sentiment of, this fast-paced culture is not really beneficial for creating a stronger kind of cultural manifestation,
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's like really important to start reimagining, what do galleries look like? How can we make them more inclusive, but also make them more, leave more of an impact, And with that, I will be cognizant of time. We have 30 minutes left. Connor, I'm going to pass it to you. What do you think about the future?
That is a good question. I think the first thing I think of is, in order to understand art, you need to see beyond it. You need to know how to see beyond the beautiful painting or the beautiful song or the beautiful words. And just, it made me think of when you said like the museums and things like that, like how many of our bones built the foundations of those museums, both inside the glass cases and on the outside. Like how many of our bones are still in those glass cases? Just thinking of my community, our graves dug up in the early 1900s and are just being returned now. And they are the ones that built the Chicago Museum. How many of our ancestors were physically in those museums while simultaneously excluding our living bodies from entering them? And how many of us are still not welcome in those spaces unless we are asked to speak? And when we are asked to speak, we are only asked to speak for that specific thing. And if we diverge from that one specific thing we are asked to speak from, we are shut down and we are told to quiet down. And that's often the sentiment that is held within those spaces. And it's hard when it comes to Indigenous art, I find, because we are constantly stuck in the past. People see us as a tradition, as a thing from the past that is not living, that is not breathing today. And I have a good friend of mine named Will Landon, and he works us from working from traditional to customary. This is our custom. This is not our tradition, because people see tradition as something in the past that we're just readapting to the modern world. It didn't continue. And in some ways it didn't continue, but that is because we weren't allowed to continue it. And so when we speak about Indigenous art or BIPOC art, it's that it's so hard it's a balancing act between, do I want you to understand me, or do I simply want you to see me and see that I exist? And so that catering to whiteness, that catering to colonialism, to colonization, just that catering to white eyes to understand. And it's so hard to understand how to do that. In one of my classes, we talk about power and who is grievable and who is ungrievable. And the grievable body is someone who was seen in life and someone who was cared for in life. And if you weren't cared for in life, then you will not be grievable in death. And when we have art installations or memorials that talk about our bodies, it's hard to balance between wanting to be grievable and also wanting to be honest, because what we see as grievable as Black and brown bodies is not the same as what mainstream society would see as grievable. We don't have the boundaries of, well, you were a bad person, so I will not mourn your death, or what is a bad person, and those boundaries of like good and evil. And I think that's so hard with art, because we want to say what we have to say, but only those who understand us understand our message. And so we have to be palatable, but in being palatable, we whitewash our ideas and we whitewash our customs and our beautiful things. But then we simultaneously have to keep like restricting ourselves when we move and we operate in those spaces. And so I think the future is about balancing that, but also just not caring to be palatable. I think that's one thing that I've learned, not caring to be angry and to be passionate and to be strong and to throw away the table and to go sit out in the land instead and just invite everyone that is willing to sit there. Because I think it's so hard to have to deal with being in between and being like, oh, will you understand me if I do it like this? Or you're just gonna see us as dream catchers and you're gonna see us as drums and those beautiful feathers and things like that. Or are you gonna understand that our history has been awful and you are complicit in that violence, and to make you understand that. And so I think the future needs to take away the idea of being palatable and just go at it at full force, because palatability has not been working so far.
Yes. Oh my goodness, so much yes. I'm like, the entire time you're talking, I'm like, when is Connor's book coming out? I want to learn more. Like, just so much goodness in there. And I think like you really said something that really resonated with me. You know, you were talking about institutions who want us to come in as tokens, but they still are not accessible to us. They were built upon our ancestors' backs, literally, physically, mentally, and we are still not allowed in them. And it makes me think about this idea, you know, I've been talking about, because I'm doing art history now, and we've been talking about, you know, galleries will be like, we're doing a Black exhibition, but we're not going to put up flyers in the Black community. Entry is still $30, and a lot of the Black communities in the area are going to be disenfranchised, or it's really far away. We're not going to cover transit, but we're going to do a Black exhibition. And then who shows up? You know, bourgeoisie white folks. And you're like, how is this for the Black community? Just because you have a token artist does not mean you're doing it for the community. And I think that's like a bigger understanding of, you know what, I mean, the system's not broken. The system is working exactly as it's supposed to work, but like, it's not enough just to put a person of color in place. We really have to strategically look at systemically deconstructing these systems and building something more holistic. Or like we're all saying, let's build our own. Let's build our own galleries, you know, for us, by us, that will truly represent us. We are so short on time, and I'm like, I'm loving this conversation. So I'm just going to skip to our last question because I really, really want to hear what you all have to say. But can you all talk about your most impactful artivist project? And if you can't think of one, you can also talk about an artist who particularly resonates with you that you want to share about or tell us about. So it can be yourself or somebody else. Feel free to plug whomever, whatever. I will pass it to Kira first.
I definitely would say that my favorite art project was with Myths and Mirrors. We did a mural behind YMCA, and I got to work with the homeless community as well as the general downtown population, and it was just so beautiful. We all came together and painted, and it was a really wholesome time, and I think that's one of the most fondest memories that I have.
Yes, I love that. Oh, all right, and I'm going to toss it to Emilio.
I don't think I'm going to talk about my own projects. I think I'm going to talk about someone who's been very inspirational to me, a good friend of mine. Her name's Rebecca Belmore. And I got to meet her in Victoria. She did a teaching gig at UVic when I was there. And I just offered to be her TA, and that was pretty amazing. And so, but I knew about her work before that, and I really think that for me, one of the most moving pieces that she's ever created is The Fountain. It's a video performance work of her on a very rocky beach. I believe it's in BC, and it's very cold, but she just has like a pair of simple pants and a t-shirt on, and she's standing by a fire. Then the next scene cuts, well, maybe I shouldn't describe it. I think everyone should just go and see that video because it's so potent and it's poetic, and it doesn't tell you what to think. There's no words spoken in it, but the potency of that performance to me is just it's such a huge gut punch about colonization, about violence in communities, violence towards one another. And when we're talking about going like Connor was talking about going full throttle, you know, I think that's a great example of a kind of full throttle artwork. And I think it will always be remembered within, you know, Indigenous art history. You know, it's one of those works, you know. So
that sounds so beautiful.
Yeah.
And with that, I will pass it to Connor.
This was so hard to narrow down. I'm like trying to break things down. Like, oh my God, which one is it? I think for me, if some of you are familiar with The Stranger by Gord Downie, I took his story of a young boy, and it's through music that he describes the life of Chenny Wenjack going to residential school. And I took his idea and I made my own story, and I called it Mande Amin Ge Aba, which means we are still here. And it's a story about a young boy going to residential school, but it's from that Indigenous lens, and it's written from his perspective. So as he grows and as he learns, you can see that he's understanding more of what's going on around him, and he grows as the story goes along. And he uses few words at first and uses Indigenous languages throughout, and he's like, I don't understand what you're saying. This is what I know to be what we are doing. And throughout, he grows and he grows and he learns to sing his songs. And as he evolves, he understands just everything going on around him and how it's slowly just tearing out pieces of him. And next year I'll be turning into a play which will have those moving pieces of that boy growing up and singing and living. And it inspired a tattoo. I now have the "We Are Here" tattooed on my body because it's a constant reminder that we are living and we are breathing and that we are here and that we are not something that can just be put into a history book. We are here. And it just began a whole year of unapologetic writing of just, this is the story of colonization. This is the story of how it impacted. This is how far away it is. It's not. It's still here. It's still living too. And it really inspired me to keep going with my writing and find that living piece of our stories. We are often just told from anthropologists' point of view, from other artists' point of view, but we are there to tell our own stories. We are still here to tell our stories. And it inspired me, that going with the work that I'm doing with life promotion with youth across Turtle Island, we creating these life promotion toolkits and speaking it at Western conferences and breaking down those barriers. And just last week, we were asked to come to a conference, and our elder told us how it's not a conference that welcomes Indigenous people. And he was expecting us to say no. And we all went, then let's go. And let's show up in our ribbon skirts. Let's show up in our ribbon shirts, and let's show them what Indigenous people are made of and how we can exist so powerfully in a space that does not want us in there. We've been doing it forever. Education, politics, healthcare has all been created with Black and brown bodies exclusion in mind. And we excel in all of those spaces across the board. And so let's take that power and let's continue. So for me, that's what I try to emulate in my art, and I try to live and breathe every day, because there is so much power in just really looking in the mirror every day and saying, Monday Amengeba, we are here, and this is what we can do with it.
Oh, Connor, remind me not to moderate a panel with you. And again, I'm going to start sobbing like a baby. I'm like, oh my God, you're talking. And I'm like, oh my goodness, hold it in. This is just it's just so moving and impactful. And I could really feel it and I can see it. And I'm like, I cannot wait to be front row in this play, just sobbing my eyes out. And I will toss it to Calcadan before we get to the questions from the audience.
So that was beautiful. The most impactful project for me, I think it's hard to really quantify what impact is. There's a lot of ways you can kind of look at it, I guess. I feel like, I don't know, there's really the most impactful ones for me would be any of the ones that I get to work with youth on. I did a mural this summer in the West End of Ottawa that was pretty large, and it had a lot of stakeholders, like the city and certain community organizations and whatnot. And the participants were all like just from public housing, young Black or immigrant youth, around 12 to 17. And they were just like the demographic that just I related to being them so much. And to just see their participation and their level of involvement with the project and what they put into it and how it represented them. And I just felt like the real impact is yet to be seen, because it's what they take from that and do in the future, for me. So it wasn't even really about the mural. And I feel like there was a lot of people that wanted to be credited, and there was like, because of the stakeholders involved, and some of that was making me feel a little bit salty through the process. But at the end of it, just like seeing the way that those youth got into it, that was what it was. So the impact for me is like the future, the change that comes about from that.
Yes, working with youth is so powerful. Oh, I'm so glad you got to share in that space.
Thanks.
And with that, we are going to go to some questions from the audience. So what I'll do is I'll read the question if anyone wants to jump in, just because I don't know if we'll have time to throw it to everybody in the last 15 minutes. But our first question comes from Selena. And it is, can you speak a little bit more on navigating professional spaces as a BIPOC artist, these being primarily white-centric spaces, examples of museums, galleries, or shows? So if anyone wants to bite into it, jump in, space is yours. I just want to give everyone the platform because I know we only have 15 minutes left.
I mean, I can jump in if you guys want.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can only give my perspective, but it's always it's a matter of personal choice, you know, what you're willing to deal with and what you're not willing to deal with, and like the decisions that you're willing to make in terms of your professional career. And you know, all of that comes down to, I feel like, personal choice, because a lot of these institutions are very Eurocentric, are very, you know, rooted in white supremacy and white privilege, and they don't really see you as anything but a commodity. So you have to, you know, really think about who you're working with. I think how I managed to navigate it personally is to be as community involved as I can, so that it's just not like only one thing or entity or group benefiting from my work. Or just myself for that matter. And the other ways that I think you can do it is to create your own things, you know, like there's nothing saying that you have to show in a white-owned gallery when we can start our own galleries. There's nothing saying, you know, like the DIY culture has to be embedded in us if we want to navigate those kind of things, you know, because changing from within will frustrate you at certain points.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. DIY culture is everything. After this talk, I'm going to be messaging you all, and we're going to talk about how we're going to build our own gallery together. Does anyone else want to take a bite at this question?
I can try. Well, I'm still new to this. I mean, I still got a few years on me. So, I mean, it's hard because at times I enjoy being perceived generally when it comes to my art, but it's weird because it also can feel very performative to be perceived but not given the same power. So it especially when it comes to being white areas and they want to display my art, which I'm always grateful for. I don't know. I feel like it's entertainment. So I'm still trying to differentiate how to feel. So it's a work in progress.
No, definitely. I feel that because like on sometimes you're like, yes, the Black person's getting it or the Indigenous person getting it, like we're getting this, but then on the other hand, it's like I'm still doing that same dance for massa, and that's not what I'm here
exactly,
for. You know?
Especially because so much of my art is rooted in my trauma. To put it up on display for everyone, especially when I'm looking back at a completely white audience, it can be a little bit, you know, like, yeah, it can be a little bit tough, but I'm trying to still figure out, you know, how I want to move through the world. So we'll see.
You'll get there. You're still just a youngin'. Amelia O'Connor, do either of you want to take a bite at this one?
I was just going to say try to get to understand and know the system that you're playing with, you know. And sometimes you got to use the laws and the established, you know, colonial laws and put up a mirror against them. So people who are trying to keep you down, you need to bring that mirror up and reflect it back to them and say, well, those are the laws you created, and I'm supposed to be considered equal within that sphere, but you're not doing that. You're doing something different where you're oppressing me or all of us or whatever the circumstance may be. And you need to lift that up to them. You can't let that perpetuate itself any longer. It can't happen anymore. And there are equality, like the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms in Canada. You need to know that inside out. And when somebody tries to step on us, you cannot let that happen. So, there's a level of awareness that I think is really important within not just, the art world especially, but there are also a lot of programs that are changing. There's a lot of programs there's a lot of funding specifically for Indigenous artists, for traditional practices, for all kinds of different work out there. And I think we need to keep on advocating for ourselves within our communities and within larger like granting bodies like Ontario Arts Council, Canada Council, etc. And so because yeah, if there's nobody advocating for that, then the status quo will remain, or it'll try to gain a more powerful position, you know?
No, definitely. I totally get that. And we have just about 10 minutes. So I'm going to toss it to Connor, and then we'll go to the last question. We'll each get like 2 quick minutes to crank out our thoughts. But Connor, go tell us what you think.
In an effort not to repeat what anybody has said, I'll just say trust your instincts. I mean, we are living beings. We are beings that feel and know things beyond what we can see and consciously understand. If you feel safe to do so, push. If you do not feel safe to do so, if you do not feel like this is an environment that is welcoming and it's not worth your energy, then don't give your energy. We don't constantly have to feed into a system that does not want anything but us to starve. Mm-hmm. And also, sometimes, unfortunately, we do bite the bullet and we go, if I don't do it, someone else will have to, or it just won't get done. And yes, there are those spaces, but after we're done doing that, we can look back and go, do you see how you were wrong? And take that instinct piece and that cultural piece and just hold your head high with it, because I mean, we're all chipping away at a block that is slowly just getting bigger, but we are getting there and we are banding together. So I just, without repeating what anybody else has said, just really trust yourself when you make those decisions on how to navigate a situation.
No, definitely. And I'm just gonna add one tiny little thing before we go to the last question. Normalize saying no. As BIPOC people, we feel like we have to say yes to everything. We feel like we have to do everything because we're like, I'm a Black person, I'm an Indigenous person, I'm a queer person. No one else has done it before, so it has to be. No, you don't have to. Don't show up for the white man. Do not show up for the Euro patriarchy. Normalize saying no. You don't have to do it. If they're not going to respect you, they do not deserve your time. That's like I lectures from a wise Black woman today, so enjoy that. All right, and with that, our last question is from Shayna. Are there any collaborations you want to engage in that would push this envelope of art, activism? What does a project look like that look like to you? You each get 2 minutes. We're gonna go super quick, starting with Connor this time. Go, 2 minutes.
Just a project that I would see?
Yeah.
I would love to see more collaboration between Black Indigenous people. I think a lot of our ideas, our lived experience is so parallel. And what I wouldn't experience as an Indigenous person, I know that my Black siblings would have experienced, and what they haven't experienced, I've experienced. And we fit so well together. I think the BIPOC movement has been my absolute favorite movement thus far, because the combination of strength that we have and the knowledge that we just inherently have in our blood memory, in our intergenerational traumas, in our intergenerational healing as well. In this generation, we are those who are pushing against it and who are collectively banding together to push against it. And I think that anything, and I mean absolutely anything, with people like the people on this panel getting together to do, I would bet my life on coming out with great success. I think that the combination of ideas and strength is just something that feeds me, that drives me, it makes me so passionate. And I know that's not really an answer on an actual project, but I just want to know absolutely anything that collectively just adds our minds together and adds our experience is such a rich and nourishing experience all around.
Yes. Oh, and Connor, don't be surprised if you see me in your DMs. You know, me and your DMs, we're collaborating on something. I'm here for this. And I will throw it to Kalkadan. What's a project that you were thinking of, and what would it look like?
You know what? Honestly, I've already seen what this project looks like. And just to touch on what Connor said, I think that I absolutely echo that sentiment 100%. And for me, the project is something I've been involved in for at least the past 6 years now, it is, which was Nui Janan, which was a project that brings artists into Indigenous communities to work with youth. But like specifically when you're talking about racialized artists like myself, Black artists and other immigrant artists, it really created an opportunity for such a melding of ideas that really are necessary for, like a total sort of decolonial idea, a decolonial project, you need all those pieces to really, defeat this monster that is colonialism. So yeah, for me, the most meaningful projects have been personally the ones where I got to work with Indigenous youth, or I had the privilege and the opportunity to be on Indigenous territory and work with communities there. So that would be what I echo and say that I've seen as something important.
No, I love that. Black and Indigenous solidarity forever. There is no Black liberation without Indigenous liberation on Turtle Island. I'm like so here for all of this, and I'm loving the scent of it. And I'm going to toss it to Emilio.
Well, I'll do a plug for a project that I'm kind of envisioning right now. I have a second cousin. His dad is my first cousin. He lives in Peru, and I only met him in 2013. And somehow, in our separate evolutions, he became a drummer just like me, and he's also a music producer. And so we want to kind of create this collaborative project together where we're going to be exploring our like Afro-Peruvian ancestry and what that means to us in musical terms. And so we're kind of we're in lots of conversations about creating a collaboration, and I hope that maybe he can come to Canada one day and we can work together for, I don't know, 6 months or a year or something like that and create something. And because we don't even really know each other all that much. So that's one idea, but there's so many others.
No, totally. I really look forward to seeing that project come to fruition. And last but not least, Kira, the young blood of the group. Tell us, what do you think?
I'm going to have to echo what everyone has been saying. Definitely Indigenous and Black collaboration. My best friend, she's Indigenous, and I've learned so much from her. We actually share so much in common while maintaining our differences. It's mind-blowing. We connect so much on a generational trauma level that it's crazy. And we can spend hours talking on poetry, and she'll be beading and I'll be painting, and just hearing that echo today, I definitely want to start a project with her. So that's on my to-do list now.
Oh, I love that so much. And I'm going to shameless plug a project about Black and Indigenous solidarity, Afro-Indigeneity, reconciling with stolen people, stolen bodies on stolen lands, collective resistance, an upcoming short documentary by Isaac Bayancourt coming to a theater near you soon, hopefully. If you don't know about the project, check out our social media, Collective Resistance. With that, thank you so much to all of our panelists today. You were absolutely a delight to chat with. Connor, Kira, Emilio, Calcadam, thank you for taking times out of your busy days, your busy lives. I really appreciate in sharing this space with you. Black and Indigenous solidarity yesterday, today, tomorrow, we are the future. And thank you all. I love you so much. I'm going to pass it back to our outro master, Isaac himself.
Hi, thank you so much, everyone. Like Emilio, Connor, Kira, Calcadan, and our moderator, Rihanna. This was such a moving and insightful discussion, and I can't wait to see all of your future projects, and I can't wait to collaborate with you all in the future as well. Like I have all these ideas popping up in my head now. But as a reminder, keep an eye open for our follow-up survey and an opportunity to be entered for a chance to win a prize pack, which includes items such as the caucus logo designed by Raven Dubowski. After a brief break, we will be back with our keynote conversation titled The Freedom Fallacy, featuring Sandy Hudson, and Shana Calix. This will be a conversation about organizing, backlash, and the future of Black resistance. It starts at 4:30 p.m. EST, and you'll have access to that event through the Zoom events lobby. And for information about Intersectional Caucus, please consult our website and stay tuned to our social media. And last but not least, I wanted to thank our sponsors again, Cambrian College, Canadian Mental Health Association, Centre de Santé Communautaire de Grand Sudbury, Le Centre Victoria pour Femmes, Coalition to End Violence Against Women, Collège Boreal, Future North, Galerie de Nouvelle Ontario, Greater Sudbury Public Library, Mental Health and Addictions Program of Health Sciences North, the Nickel Orfillery, Public Health Sudbury Districts, Réseau Access Network, Sudbury Action Center for Youth, also known as SASSY, Sudbury Workers Education and Advocacy Center, also known as SWIAC, and the YWCA Sudbury. In the spirit of the conference theme, amplifying voices on Turtle Island, stay loud, stay proud, our voices will be heard. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion, and have a splendid rest of your day.